Hello, folks. Just wanted to get started with Amena's talk. Amena is doing a talk on real blooms and fake flowers, ethics in the age of artificial intelligence, which should be very interesting. And Amena is also one of our fabulous con organizers too. So she's done a lot behind the scenes as well as on the stage. So take it away.
Thank you. So, real blooms and fake flowers. Can anyone tell me on this slide how many fake flower images there are? On this particular compilation, this collage. Sorry. There's a specific number.
It's seven fake ones.
Okay, so there are 3 fake flowers. So it's the one that's directly by my name, the one that's in the kind of the mid upper left of the image, and the one that is right above that little neural network symbol. 3. And they look like, don't they blend in really well? You could not tell that they were fake, right? Okay. Sorry, more technical difficulties. Okay, do I need to do it that way? Marcel? Is there some connection issue? Because the clicker isn't. No. Yes. Okay. The technology works. It is pleased with us. Okay. So my name is Amena Jamali, as Marcel said, and I am talking about ethics with this particular background. I have a bachelor's in political philosophy. So the official name of the degree is politics, but most of my coursework in that program was philosophy. So study of the ancients, study of the Enlightenment, study of some of the postmodern, study of some of the contemporaries. So a lot of ethics, different sorts, but I do have my specialty, and I'll tell you in the next slide. I also have an MS in cybersecurity. I'm one of the chapter leads for the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu. I'm currently doing SOC 2 auditing at Tavora, and I am a published epic fantasy author, which that is where my practice of ethical arguments usually takes place these days. And really excited to share this with you. It's probably not what you're expecting, but it will be fun and educational, hopefully. So this particular talk comes from my particular specialty in political philosophy and ethics, which is the study of the ancients, of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Not to say that I don't have an understanding of those who came after, but that is my particular focus. In the poll that I sent out before this talk began, I put some options of what some of you might have been, like a devotee of the ancients, a child of the Enlightenment. I am a devotee of the ancients. So this talk is organized a little bit along those lines. There is a really odd feature in Aristotle where whenever he begins an argument, he begins with what people say. So what people say about courage, what people say about politics, what people say about tyranny, what people say. And I've always found that really interesting because it kind of implies that there is a wisdom in what people simply talk about. that the conversation that they have that isn't necessarily geared towards a particular agenda, isn't necessarily focused, that itself has meaning, value, and wisdom. So using that kind of thinking, some months ago, I realized I was seeing two very different conversations happening on social media. On my LinkedIn, which is cybersecurity focused, I was seeing a lot of a more positive view of artificial intelligence. And on my Instagram, which is author and artist focus, I was seeing a very different negative conversation happening. And I began to get really interested into why that conversation was happening and what it really said about the changes that are going on in our society. So another asterisk here is that this is not a technical talk. Sorry. I think that was a different talk that focused on the technical aspects of artificial intelligence. This is more focused on the ethics of it. So because of that dual focused, I have kind of taken my argument for the sake of brevity into starting with two different sides. One is the cybersecurity side, and one is the creative side. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of both before I really get into the meat of the things that I've considered, and hopefully you will consider alongside me. Oh, and it's not about a particular AI. I should mention that too. It's about more of the concept of generative AI in general. So the cybersecurity side, the conversations I've been seeing are, and even today at this conference, are more of cybersecurity as a sort of potential good. And I won't go into extreme depth because I'm sure you're all just as familiar, or if not more familiar with it than I am. So, but in brief, so some examples of the conversations on this topic are that it is something of immense utility, that it can help in various aspects of cybersecurity that are actually really difficult as a human being to manage, like scanning large applications, filtering large amounts of alerts in the SOC, helping with cyber threat intelligence, things of that nature. And some of the issues that people discuss are data privacy issues, cybercrime, exploits, the idea that this isn't just a defender's side of the house kind of thing, but it's also something that attackers can have, and it's something that it can be exploited. The conversation here, though, and this is the particular element I'm drawing from my argument, is that it seems to be primarily about adoption, that there are issues, but with a good amount of adaptation and changes in scope, maybe instituting data privacy rules, it's something that is of potential good for our community in cybersecurity and good for the work that we do in the world. And the key point is that it will enhance our jobs. It won't take them. Okay, so the creative side, my indie author and indie artist circle speaks about this in a very different way. It's kind of alarming to see the contrast. That contrast comes with talking about artificial intelligence in a way that describes it as a potential evil, if not emphatically evil. It's kind of surprising. It's something, some of the uses that I've heard people talk about are that it can be used for proofreading, for generating ideas and prompts for the author or the artist that's stuck, maybe making the fine details of images so one doesn't have to start art at the absolute basic blank canvas. But those conversations are kind of fewer and far between. The majority of the conversation is about AI stealing the jobs of artists. Like, that is something that is like literally all over my Instagram, that this is something that people are legitimately afraid of. And any of the conversations I've had, any of the conferences I've attended in this particular area, they really do seem to be giving that particular view and interpretation of artificial intelligence. So this has kind of gone to the extent that there are entire accounts that openly and publicly state that they do not accept the use of AI images in even minor material, and that they will unfollow and restrict and block the accounts of people who do use those images. So a lot of antagonism there. And the key point of this, so here's a key point to remember in all of this, to help with the neutrality needed for this argument, that a lot of the people who do work and who do indie art and indie publishing, these are people who don't have a lot of protection for their work, because as individuals, they don't have any big company backing them. So there is very little protection from piracy, and piracy, even outside the area of artificial intelligence, is a major concern. So it's it contributes to that kind of thinking, that there is a lot of risk here. So those are my brief overview of both sides. And keeping in mind that this is supposed to be a neutral argument, I've come here with the hope that I can maintain a neutral mindset, and I encourage you to do the same. I'm distilling these two ideas into sort of this interesting dichotomy of utility versus principle. So on the one hand, there is this conversation about the value of this technology to our lives, how it will improve the world. And on the other, the belief, the fear that the technology will subsume the human experience, subsume human beauty. And so it's a really interesting conversation if we're kind of not thinking about the personal stakes of the matter. So this is the dichotomy that I'm using to set the terms and the scope of my presentation. These are not the only perspectives out there, not the only way to interpret this, but for the sake of actually making a coherent argument, having a coherent discussion, these are the terms. And again, doing my best to be neutral. So some considerations. The technology already exists, unlike what some of my artist friends kind of seem to imply. It's not like there's an undo button. We can't just simply take back the technology that is in the world and stuff it back into Pandora's box and pretend it was never there. It does exist. It's real, it's alive, and ignoring it doesn't go away. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It's sort of like, this kind of thinking that I think we in cybersecurity would understand, that threats don't disappear when we risk accept. They're still here. So whether you like it or not, the technology exists, and it's something that we really do need to discuss in an ethical fashion. So this leads me to my next question. So how will people use AI? Does anyone have an opinion on this? Anyone who wants to volunteer an idea? Yeah, for example. Siobhan said people are using AI to write their papers. That's definitely one use. Does anyone else have an idea of a thought on how people are using it or using it themselves? So using it to write emails that sound professional for a client. Okay, and also PowerShell. Sorry? Cover letters. Okay. Hey, Marcel. So chat boxes on company websites. Yes. Okay, so enhancing assignments for your graduate students. Yes. Product research and comparison.
I like to look for it. Yeah, they ask me something really basic. I put it into like like write instructions on how to add an email to iPhone.
Okay, so writing instructions. Okay, study guides. So when I asked this question, those are all really good answers, and they kind of get towards they do get towards the the consideration that I like to put forth here. And that is that when we're discussing how people will use artificial intelligence, and I think when I give these examples, it'll make sense, that we need to, for an ethical argument, we need to think about how previous new technologies have been used. So things like writing papers, writing instructions. Well, okay, I'm a little too young to remember this, but there was the age before the internet where apparently people could not use Google to help them write these things using Google for like prompts of how particular things should be worded, easily get those instructions together from what someone else has already done. There was that age too. I don't remember it, but it was apparently an age. So the specific thing I'd like to focus on here is the internet as a sort of democratization of information. So there is, with the internet, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, when we use the internet, instead of necessarily going and asking someone a question, we go and ask the internet a question. We Google it. So there is a sort of removing that human element there that's going on. I particularly sometimes have a problem with asking difficult questions because I don't want to seem dumb. I'm sure it's an issue that many women have. So in the interest of not appearing dumb, I go and ask the internet and presume that it will tell me the correct answer. Now, that correct answer is not necessarily actually correct, but I went and asked the internet. There's also this particular element. So a few weeks ago, I was in the middle of writing a description of anxiety for one of my characters in a book. And so there were two ways I could have gone about it. I could have asked the internet, gone onto WebMD and found a list of symptoms and, compiled it from there. Or I could go and ask someone who has that experience and learned how it was that they lived with it, how they felt with it, how they went about their day-to-day lives. So, but the internet removes the need of me doing that. Similarly, with the use of GPS, major technology that has revolutionized our world. On the road trip I took to get to this conference, my parents and I were having this discussion about how GPS has changed how we go about trips. There was a day that we used to have paper maps, and my mother would know exactly where the rest area was from the map and would know exactly how a particular route would be in terms of actually driving it from the map. Now we just ask the GPS. GPS doesn't necessarily know. There was this one time that it was telling us to take the straight road, but the straight road was not the fastest road because it was bound to be full of traffic. Doesn't have that kind of context always. But there is this tendency we have to use the GPS and simply make it easier, more cost effective, more efficient, even if that's not necessarily the case. So that contributes to some of the ways that we were discussing about the ways AI might be used. So, and this is one I hear a lot about from my friends, generating art for characters and book covers. So instead of going to a human artist and taking the time to explain exactly what a person wants and how it should look and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, so many back and forths, just simply putting it into an image generator and getting the thing. Or an example that is maybe not as emotionally laden, using it to filter alerts, using it to scan an environment, using it to sort of consolidate the amount of threat intelligence or application scanning that we in the cybersecurity field must do. There's also one other consideration I would like to cover here. So when we're thinking about how AI will be used, I think it's valuable to think about how previous developments in IT, other than the internet and GPS, have been used in the last 10, 15 years. So I'm a little too young to remember this directly, but there was 10, 15 years ago, there was this whole movement of moving IT tasks, even whole departments offshore. And maybe some of you have had a different experience, but it didn't always go well. It didn't always go well to remove that internal element of IT, but it was more cost effective to do so. It didn't always go well. So what I'm kind of getting from all the conversations, from the brief discussion we've had here, is that like technology in general, AI is something that that when we are thinking about using, we're thinking about simplification, cost effectiveness, and in many ways, removing the human element, making things simpler. And often making things simpler is to remove that human element. So this leads to a key issue. The key issue I came across while making this argument, that I wonder if it's occurring to some of you, is that, okay, so we're talking about AI doing things that humans might do. Could there not be a belief that AI can do the work, the entire work of a human being? So it's not, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of conversations. AI can't do the work of human beings, but could people believe that it might do the work of human beings? Okay, so these are some concerns I have with that particular statement. So I can see as an auditor, I'm an SOC 2 auditor by in my career right now. I can see how that would make my life easier. There are 1,000 documents I review for every SOC 2 engagement. There's that change ticket and that incident response ticket and that policy. It would be so much easier if that was all boiled down and given to me, and I could more easily tell what documents should be accepted and then focus on the things that are actually difficult and require a human element. But could someone not believe that that human element could be entirely removed? So much of my analysis in my career right now is very formulaic. I examine these documents based on my memory of 100 other documents, a dozen different projects. And that's how I come across what should be counted as an exception and what shouldn't be. It's how I determine what should be used as a particular piece of evidence for a control and what shouldn't be. So it's very formulaic. Well, formulas are in many ways what generative AI is very good at doing. At least so the impression goes. So could I not be removed? There's always the pressure to be more cost effective, more efficient. And as a human being, I can't possibly be fully efficient and fully cost effective. Just can't. Similarly, as an author, and this speaks to that creative side that I mentioned earlier, a lot of books, this is something that as an author, I noticed this in the market, a lot of books are very formulaic too. So there is a specific set of characters, there's a specific kind of plot. It's like a lot of books, and not necessarily speaking against those authors, it's just an observation, often are, okay, A plus B plus C plus D equals a good plot, and X should lead to Y, X should lead to Z, should lead to W, it should lead to S, and so ends the story. Very formulaic. And those are the things that actually generally sell. So why do we need me, the author, to write books again? They're not selling. I'm not selling thousands of books. So why am I important again? So the concern here that I'm bringing is it's not whether the AI is as good at the task as a human. I think that based on the current level of technology and anything that is currently discussed in the field, it's pretty well agreed upon that AI can't replace human beings. But could people not believe that the AI could replace human beings? And in the pursuit of thinking it is as good as a human being, could it be possible that many people might be harmed before we realize that the quality is in fact not equal? So, and this is a little bit more personal statement. The first people to be affected, I think, when such a conversation comes about on what is most cost effective, generally tends to be people who are a lot more like us, women and minorities, because the frank reality is that are we not seen as disposable more often than other people? So in considering this question and this problem, I then got to thinking, and I hope you're thinking too, that what is the guidance that applies here? What model does apply here? What offers ethical guidance? I have this concern that as a society, we haven't really dealt with the ethical issues of social media, computers, and the internet. And it's my concern that that many of the things around disinformation show that we haven't really grasped how it works as a society, what sort of outcomes and effects it could have, ways that it has changed us, ways that it is changing the next generation. So we haven't really necessarily dealt with this as a society, but the other thing to note is that we have in fact absorbed it. Social media is so much more a part of our lives than we probably could have ever imagined 10, 15 years ago. So we've absorbed it, but we haven't necessarily dealt with it. In here, I would like to add that regulation is not, I think, the answer. So many of the conversations about artificial intelligence in any community, whether the creative one I'm referencing, the cybersecurity one, is that there needs to be regulation. I don't necessarily think that that is the default answer we should be going for, since regulation laws are very difficult to get passed. I don't really need to tell you that. Gridlock in Congress, we all know about it. It's a big problem. It's why data privacy laws take so long to get implemented. Yeah, big problem. Legal action is more of a reactive measure. And a student of politics, whether it is someone who has studied it or someone who lives with it, we all know that since it's a reactive measure, society needs to think about something, needs to come to a consensus before our lawmakers really do anything in this area. So for the purposes of this presentation, regulation is not the answer. It's really easy to rely on the government telling us what to do. But since we can't rely upon it, how do we make a decision in an uncharted space? There is no Nicomachean ethics, the work of Aristotle that describes how virtue ethics is supposed to be respected. So how people are supposed to implement it in their lives. There's no Nicomachean ethics for this. There's no Aristotle's politics. There's no Cicero's De Republica. There isn't, although I have heard that that NIST is working on documentation in this area. That documentation certainly is not yet at the level of NIST 853. We're not yet there. So there is no widespread industry kind of guidance on how it's supposed to be. So when we don't have that, how do we come to a decision about the ethics of it? So here is something that comes from that kind of from the ethics that I've studied. Generally, in a question that is completely new, like some of the Enlightenment philosophers talked about, is that we need some sort of generally applicable way of thinking. Something like democracy is something that leads to the empowerment of the people. Some general axiom, something on which additional ideas can be layered. So this is my axiom. This is the axiom I put forth to you from me, the presenter, to you, the audience, for your consideration. The work of the human being should be esteemed. So what I mean by this is the policy that the technical writer painstakingly researches and compiles the client's configurations and controls and existing status in order to make. The report that is compiled by the SOC analyst, the code crafted by the developer, the art painted by the artist, all the painstaking hours of doing it by hand, the book. So the value of our sweat, tears, and stress, hopefully not blood, but certainly those things. So the reason I'm putting forth this idea, so to speak, the evidence I'm using to support it, is that AI doesn't really generate anything new. It does what it's instructed to do. And the implication is that what it generates was already existing in a different form, but it recompiled and rearranged. And so for that, this axiom kind of already fits. It's already using an existing human being's work. It's not actually making new material such that it would be respected like a human being's. It's a human being could make new work. The AI, current technology, at least doesn't. It's also this thinking of AI as a tool. So as an example, we all use Google to look things up. I haven't really heard of anyone who doesn't use Google to look things up. Maybe you have. At least I haven't. But we do give greater value, don't we, to someone who says that I have spent 10 years on a PhD in this particular area, and I can prove it with this paper and this original paper and this presentation and this topic, and these are all my works. Don't we give greater value to that person than the article we found online? At least in my experience, we do. So the ways that then AI would be used is as a supplement, a checker, a place to jumpstart a process, a way to discuss ideas. So this is coming back to the original point of utility versus principle, real blooms versus fake flowers. In that original image I presented to you, the fake flowers do actually enhance the image. They fill up spaces that were empty before. It's like seeing a beautiful flower arrangement. Some of the elements of it can be false, they can be plastic, but that contributes to the beauty. But if you saw an arrangement that was entirely real, maybe it wilts. If you saw an arrangement that was entirely fake, it doesn't have the beauty, the scent, the smell, the touch of the real arrangement. So it's a combination. The one would help us do our jobs better and live more fruitful lives. The other would respect the beauty of what it means to be human. So the application of this axiom is expecting labeling. So if a work is made through the use of AI, it is labeled. If it involves the use of an AI, it is also labeled. And we don't expect human work to be labeled. We expect AI work to be. So what that kind of makes it is that it's not special now. So I've heard some of the posts I've talked about, I've seen, discussed, reshared, is they present AI as something that is revolutionary, groundbreaking, completely changing the course of human history. I don't think that, I think that this view could be construed as making it less special, at least construed that way. So in this view, AI is not too different than the smartphone, the internet, or social media. It's not so revolutionary in the grand scheme of things. It's not a reshaping of humanity, a complete reorientation of what it means to be human. It's not really worth naming an age after either, like I did in the title. But do we really want it to be revolutionary? That is the question I think that we probably need to take a second to consider. So when we think that AI is special, the fake flowers are all that is important. And does that really result in a society where the work of the human being is valued and respected, especially we as minorities? So part of this is also that, okay, it doesn't affect us now. It hasn't done this yet. It might be affecting people that are not us, might be affecting another group. One of the things I've heard a lot of artists say is that authors are not concerned about this because it's not their work yet. When we kind of dismiss something that in that direction, there isn't a lot of preparation, a lot of established thinking for when it is our work and our passions, our output at stake, our work to be respected. So such an idea doesn't just spread, is also another important aspect of this. Although courage and wisdom and virtue in the Nicomachean ethics were already existing concepts, Aristotle combining it and giving definitions to it, giving power to it. Not that I'm comparing myself to Aristotle because I'm nowhere near that, probably will not ever be, but him compiling it, him articulating it, gave it new power. It gave it a standard. It gave it a platform upon which to spread. And Okay, this whole like presentation of mine may seem very self-evident, but sometimes things that are very self-evident are not actually very self-evident. We very much know that. I mean, it should be granted that women are powerful and should be respected, but it's not necessarily the case. It should be granted that women rights are human rights, but that's not necessarily self-evident to everyone, even though it should be. And also, giving an idea voice gives it power. So this is where I put in my call to action. I feel like I do these in every presentation these days, but sorry. That is me telling me that my time is up. So it's a good thing I'm at the end of the presentation, and I will wrap this up really quickly. So basically, we must each make the choice to adhere to this axiom. Governments, industries, and societies are collections of humans. They won't magically make the necessary choices. It won't happen at the wave of a wand, even if we wish it might be. We have to start somewhere. And we have to keep pushing that forward until people do begin to make ethical choices of their own accord. And this is the statement that particularly resounded with me when I was thinking about the potential of ethics, that ethics is theory. It has no value beyond a piece of paper because it is simply theory. That is the problem with it. If you don't actualize its potential, it means nothing. So we, not necessarily putting this on someone, but if you want to be put upon, you can definitely take it. We need to actualize the potential, make it more than just theory. The work of the human being should be esteemed. And that is the end of my presentation. I don't know if I have time for questions because the next presentation, which I know is awesome, is about to start. But I did put up my contact information if anyone wants to take a picture.